You're sitting at your desk, the screen is on, the task is simple, you know exactly what to do, and yet nothing happens. Your body is still, but inside your mind, everything is moving at once. Scenarios collide, risks multiply, conversations replay. You draft the same email 5 different ways without typing a single word. This is the quiet paradox of intelligence. The smarter your brain, the harder it can become to move. You're not lazy, you're not distracted. Your mind is working overtime. But here's the problem: thinking feels like progress. It feels responsible. It feels productive. In reality, it's a psychological trap. Your ability to analyze, predict, and optimize has turned against you. Instead of acting, you audit. Instead of moving forward, you calculate every possible failure. Your brain treats uncertainty like danger. So it tries to eliminate risk by thinking harder, longer, deeper. But clarity never comes. Only exhaustion does. By the end of the day, you feel drained, like you ran a marathon, yet nothing meaningful is finished. This is analysis paralysis, a silent force that kills momentum while convincing you that you're being careful, smart, and prepared. It whispers, just 5 more minutes of thinking. But perfection never arrives. Time disappears. Action freezes. Today we're going to break this mechanism down. Why intelligent minds fall into overdrive, how overthinking destroys productivity, and how to finally release the mental brakes. You are not broken. You're just stuck in overdrive. And it's time to find the off switch. Chapter 1. The hidden enemy in your mind. You are sitting in a quiet room. The world around you is still. To an outside observer, you look peaceful, or perhaps deep in concentration. You might be sitting at a desk with a glowing monitor, or lying in bed staring at a dark ceiling. But inside the silence is a lie. Your internal landscape is not a sanctuary. It is a battlefield. There is a hidden enemy in your mind, and it is fighting a war against your potential. Welcome to the first chapter of our deep dive into the psychology of productivity and the mind. We are beginning with the foundation. We must identify the antagonist of this story. We call it overthinking, but that word is often misused. It has become a casual term we throw around to describe moments of hesitation. But true psychological overthinking is not simply thinking too much. It is something far more specific and far more dangerous. To understand this enemy, we must first strip away the common misconceptions. Thinking is a tool. It is the cognitive process of analyzing data to reach a conclusion. It is linear. You have a problem A. You analyze it to find solution B. You execute solution B. That is thinking. Overthinking is not a tool. It is a loop. It is a cognitive malfunction where the analysis disconnects from the solution. The mechanism jams. You are no longer moving from A to B. You are moving from A to A. You are circling the problem, examining it from every angle, dissecting its texture, and imagining its history. You are expending massive amounts of energy, but you have no forward momentum. This distinction is critical because overthinking disguises itself as intelligence. This is why smart people are the most susceptible to this trap. If you have a high-powered engine in your car, you want to drive it fast. If you have a high-powered brain, you want to use it. The problem arises when you press the accelerator while the car is in neutral. The engine roars. The noise is impressive. The fuel is burning. The internal temperature rises. But the car does not move. This brings us to the most seductive lie of the overthinking mind. The lie is that your anxiety is actually productivity. Overthinking feels like work. It feels responsible. It feels like due diligence. When you spend 3 hours obsessing over the font choice for a presentation, or 3 days replaying a conversation with your boss, your brain tells you that you are working. You are engaging with the subject matter. You are caring about the outcome. But let us look at the psychological reality. This is not work. This is fear wearing a business suit. The brain is a problem-solving machine, but it is also an energy-conserving machine designed for survival. Action is dangerous. Action carries the risk of failure, rejection, and loss. Thinking, however, is safe. As long as you are just thinking about the project, you cannot fail at the project. As long as you are just planning the workout regimen, you do not have to feel the pain of the gym. So your brain offers you a compromise. It allows you to feel the sensation of working without the risk of acting. It traps you in the simulation of productivity. You finish the day exhausted. Your mental battery is drained. You feel the heavy weight of stress in your shoulders. You tell yourself that you worked hard today, but if you look at your output, nothing has changed in the physical world. This is the hallmark of the hidden enemy. It consumes your fuel but gives you no mileage. Let us examine the signs that this enemy has infiltrated your daily routine. The symptoms are often subtle at first. The first sign is a disproportionate relationship between the size of the decision and the time spent making it. We all agree that buying a house requires deep thought, but overthinking invades the trivial. You might find yourself standing in the aisle of a grocery store, staring at 2 different brands of pasta sauce for 5 minutes. Your brain is running a cost-benefit analysis on a $3 purchase. You are weighing the sugar content against the price, against the label design, against the memory of a review you once read. This is not diligence. This is a leak in your cognitive battery. Another sign is the endless editing loop. This often plagues creatives and professionals. You write an email. It is a simple email. It conveys the necessary information, but then you pause, you read it again. You wonder if the tone is too aggressive. You change the word need to the word request. You delete the exclamation point. You add the exclamation point back. You worry that the recipient might interpret your brevity as anger. You spend 20 minutes on a task that should have taken 2. You are not improving the communication. You are managing your own anxiety about how you are perceived. Then there is the sign of future casting. This is where your imagination turns against you. Instead of planning for probable outcomes, you begin to prepare for impossible catastrophes. You have a presentation on Friday. A healthy mind prepares the slides and practices the speech. An overthinking mind creates a movie in your head. In this movie, the projector fails, the audience laughs, and you forget your own name. You then spend hours developing contingency plans for disasters that statistically will never happen. You are solving problems that do not exist. These are not just bad habits, they are mental loops that have been reinforced over years. Your brain has learned that this cycle of worry keeps you safe from the immediate pain of taking a risk. It is a maladaptive coping mechanism. To truly understand this, we need to look at real-life examples of these mental loops. We need to see how they manifest in the wild. Consider the loop of the unsent message. You need to send a difficult text to a friend or a colleague. You type it out. Then the loop begins. You look at the cursor blinking. You imagine their reaction. You imagine they get angry. You imagine they stop talking to you. You imagine the degradation of the friendship. The emotional center of your brain lights up as if these things are actually happening. You feel the guilt of the conflict before the conflict has even occurred. To avoid this feeling, you delete the text. You decide to send it later when the time is right, but the time is never right. The loop repeats every time you think of them. The task remains unfinished, draining a small percentage of your mental RAM every single hour of every single day. Consider the loop of the information hoarder. This is common among students and entrepreneurs. You want to start a business or write a paper. You need to do research. Research is good. But the overthinker uses research as a shield against starting. You read one article. That leads to a book. That leads to a podcast. That leads to a seminar. You convince yourself that you cannot possibly begin until you know everything. You are building a mountain of knowledge, but you are too afraid to climb it. You are suffering from the illusion that more input will eventually result in output. But input never equals output without the friction of action. Consider the loop of the replay. This is the retrospective attack. You are lying in bed at night. The day is over. You should be resting. Instead, your brain drags up a memory from 2 p.m. You made a joke in a meeting. Nobody laughed. It was a minor moment. Everyone else in that room has already forgotten it. But you press play. You watch the scene in your mind. You analyze the faces of your colleagues. You interpret their silence as judgment. You tell yourself you are socially awkward. You spiral into a narrative that your reputation is damaged. This is the enemy stealing your sleep and sabotaging your confidence for the next day. These loops are exhausting. They are biological taxes on your well-being. And the tragedy is that they are invisible to everyone else. When you look at a productive person, you might assume they have a faster brain than you. You might think they are smarter. But often the only difference is that they have a shorter refractory period between thought and action. They have the same doubts. They have the same fears. But they do not invite those fears in for tea. They do not allow the thought to loop. They acknowledge the thought and then they move physically. The hidden enemy in your mind thrives on stillness. It thrives on the gap between intention and execution. The longer you wait to do the thing, the louder the voice becomes. There is a concept in psychology called the spotlight effect. It is the belief that everyone is watching you and judging your every move. Overthinking is fueled by this spotlight. You believe that your actions carry momentous weight. You believe that a mistake will be fatal. This inflates the importance of every decision. If you believe that choosing the wrong font for your website will destroy your career, of course you will overthink it. Of course you will freeze. The reality is that most decisions are reversible. Most mistakes are forgettable. The world is noisy and people are self-absorbed. They are not studying your life with a microscope. But the overthinking mind convinces you that you are walking a tightrope over a canyon. It raises the stakes until the pressure is unbearable. This pressure creates a state of internal friction. Imagine a machine where the gears are grinding against each other. That is the overthinking mind. Heat is generated, but movement is restricted. This friction manifests as physical symptoms. You might feel a tightness in your chest. You might feel a persistent low-grade headache. You might find yourself sighing deeply, trying to release the tension. This is your body reacting to the stress of the mental war. It is important to recognize that this enemy is not a foreign invader. It is part of you. It is your own protective instinct overdrive. Your brain is trying to save you from uncertainty. The human brain hates uncertainty. It perceives the unknown as a threat to survival. In the ancestral environment, if you heard a rustle in the bushes, it was better to overthink and assume it was a lion than to underthink and assume it was the wind. Paranoia kept us alive, but we no longer live in the ancestral environment. We live in a world of high complexity, low stakes social interactions. The rustle in the bushes is just an email from your boss. It is just a decision about what to eat for lunch. It is just a creative project. It is not a lion, but your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, does not know the difference. It floods your system with cortisol. It screams at you to freeze. It screams at you to analyze the threat. This is why the battle against overthinking is so difficult. You are fighting against your own biology. You are fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming that says thinking is safer than doing. As we move through this series, we are going to dismantle this programming. We are going to learn how to rewire the response. But the first step is this recognition. You must stop identifying with the voice in your head. You are not the voice. You are the one listening to the voice. When you catch yourself in a loop, you must label it. You must say to yourself, this is not productive work. This is the loop. This is the hidden enemy. By naming it, you separate yourself from it. You create a tiny wedge of space between the thinker and the thought. In that space, freedom begins. We have defined the enemy. We know what it looks like. We know how it feels to be trapped in the illusion of productivity. We know the cost of the mental loops, but knowing the enemy is only the beginning. To defeat it, we must understand its weapons. In the next chapter, we will explore the specific tools this enemy uses to destroy your output. We will discuss analysis paralysis. We will dissect the crippling nature of perfectionism. We will look at how the brain turns small choices into massive drains on your time. We are going to shine a light on the productivity killers. You have lived in the loop long enough. It is time to step out of the circle and into a straight line toward your goals. If you are ready to take control of your mind and silence the noise, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. This journey is just beginning, and you will not want to miss the tools we are about to uncover. Join us as we continue to dismantle the paralysis of the intelligent mind. Chapter 2: The Productivity Killers. Now that we have stripped away the mask of overthinking and recognized it for what it truly is, we must venture deeper into the mechanics of this internal sabotage. You know that overthinking is the enemy. But how exactly does it dismantle your ability to get things done? It does not attack you with a single blunt instrument. It uses specific, sophisticated psychological traps that arrest your momentum and drain your cognitive resources. We need to dissect the 4 specific ways your mind turns against your output. These are the distinct patterns of thought that transform a capable, intelligent individual into a frozen observer of their own life. You will likely recognize yourself in one, if not all, of these profiles. The first and perhaps most notorious killer is analysis paralysis. This is the state where the sheer volume of information or the number of potential choices overwhelms your ability to select a path. In psychology, we often look at this as a conflict between the desire for certainty and the reality of risk. When you are faced with a decision, whether it is starting a new business venture, choosing a thesis topic, or simply picking a software for your workflow, your brain begins a risk assessment. A healthy mind assesses risk, accepts a margin of error, and acts. But the overthinking mind craves absolute certainty. You convince yourself that if you just gather one more piece of data, if you just read one more review, if you just run one more simulation in your head, the correct choice will shine like a beacon and guarantee success. This is a delusion. The trap of analysis paralysis is that it feels like work. Researching feels responsible. Comparing options feels diligent. You tell yourself you are being thorough, but psychologically, you are not working. You are hiding. You are delaying the moment of truth where you must commit to a course of action. Once you act, you open yourself up to judgment and the possibility of failure. As long as you are analyzing, you remain safe in the realm of theory. But this safety comes at a devastating cost. While you analyze, time moves forward. Opportunities decay. The psychological weight of the unmade decision grows heavier with every hour that passes. The mental energy required to hold all those options in your working memory is immense. You are burning through your daily supply of focus without actually producing a single tangible result. You end the day exhausted, yet you have moved 0 inches forward. This is the paradox of analysis. You are mentally running a marathon, but physically, you are standing still. The second productivity killer is the sophisticated cousin of paralysis. It is perfectionism. We often wear perfectionism as a badge of honor. In job interviews, when asked for a weakness, people smugly say they are perfectionists, implying that they simply care too much about quality. But from a psychological perspective, perfectionism is not about high standards, it is about fear. Perfectionism is a defense mechanism. It is the belief that if you do something perfectly, you can avoid criticism, rejection, and failure. It is the armor you wear to protect your ego. When you allow perfectionism to dictate your workflow, you create a binary outcome in your mind. Either the work is flawless, or it is worthless. There is no middle ground for progress, iteration, or learning. This mindset destroys productivity because it makes the barrier to entry impossibly high. Think about how this plays out in your day. You sit down to write a report. You write the first sentence. You look at it. You judge it. It is not profound enough. You delete it. You write it again. You change one adjective. You delete it again. 20 minutes have passed, and you are still wrestling with the opening line. This is not diligence. This is insecurity manifesting as editing. You are terrified of the messy middle part of creation. You want the final, a polished product to emerge fully formed from your mind, bypassing the gritty, imperfect process of actually doing the work. Perfectionism also creates a dangerous relationship with completion. You delay finishing a project because as long as it is unfinished, it has infinite potential. As soon as you call it done and ship it, it becomes a static object subject to the world's opinion. So you polish, you tweak, and you refine endlessly, reaching a point of diminishing returns where your effort is no longer improving the output, but simply soothing your anxiety. The third killer is the loop of catastrophic prediction. We call these the constant what-ifs. Your brain is a prediction engine. Its primary evolutionary job is to predict threats to keep you alive. In the wild, this meant asking, what if there is a predator in that bush? In the modern workspace, this mechanism misfires. It latches onto your projects and goals and begins to spin scenarios of disaster. What if I present this idea and everyone laughs? What if I invest time in this skill and it becomes obsolete? What if I send this email and there is a typo I missed? This is mental time travel. You are projecting yourself into a hypothetical future that has not happened, and you are emotionally living through the failure. Your body reacts to these thoughts. Your cortisol spikes, your stomach tightens. You feel the shame of a failure that exists only in your imagination. The productivity cost here is strictly biological. Processing these negative scenarios consumes massive amounts of glucose and oxygen in the brain. It is metabolically expensive to be anxious. When you spend your morning commuting to work, worrying about all the things that might go wrong, you arrive at your desk with your mental battery already half drained. You cannot focus on deep, complex work when a part of your brain is busy fighting off imaginary dragons. This background radiation of worry fragments your attention. You might be physically looking at a spreadsheet, but psychologically, you are 5 years in the future, worrying about a career collapse that started because you made a mistake in cell C4. This catastrophic thinking forces you into a defensive posture. Instead of playing to win, you play not to lose. You choose the safest, most conservative, and often least productive path because it quiets the terrifying what-ifs, even if it stifles your potential. The fourth and final killer in this chapter is the silent assassin. It is the accumulation of small decisions. We tend to think that only big decisions matter. We agonize over the career pivot or the house purchase. But productivity is often bled dry by the thousands of micro decisions you make every day. Every time you have to decide what to wear, what to eat for lunch, which font to use, whether to answer that text now or later, or which task to put on your to-do list, you are tapping into a finite resource called executive function. Psychologists refer to the depletion of this resource as decision fatigue. The overthinker does not know how to automate the trivial. They apply the same level of intense scrutiny to ordering a coffee as they do to strategic planning. They stand in the aisle at the grocery store, paralyzed by the choice between 2 brands of toothpaste, weighing the pros and cons, reading the ingredients, checking the price per ounce. This might seem harmless. It is just toothpaste, but your brain does not have separate fuel tanks for big decisions and small decisions. It draws from the same reservoir. By expending high-level cognitive energy on low-value choices, you leave yourself bankrupt when it comes time to do the work that actually matters. This is why you might find yourself hitting a wall at 2 p.m. You sit down to do the most important task of the day, and your mind just slides off the page. You feel a physical resistance to thinking. It is not because you are lazy. It is because you spent your prime cognitive hours overthinking the wording of a 2-sentence email or debating which playlist to listen to. These small decisions act like barnacles on the hull of a ship. 1 or 2 do not matter, but when you are an overthinker, you are covered in them. The drag is enormous. You are applying full power to your engine, but you are barely moving through the water because you are weighed down by the accumulation of meaningless choices. When you combine these 4 killers, you see the full picture of the tragedy. Analysis paralysis keeps you from starting. Perfectionism keeps you from finishing. The what-ifs drain your energy while you work. And small decisions waste your willpower on the trivial. It is a perfect storm designed to keep you stagnant. Notice that in all 4 cases, the underlying theme is a distortion of reality. You believe you are being careful, but you are being fearful. You believe you are maximizing quality, but you are minimizing output. You believe you are preparing for the future, but you are sabotaging the present. This is a psychological trap, but it is not a life sentence. Understanding these mechanisms is the first step in dismantling them. You cannot fight an enemy you cannot see. Now you see them. You can observe yourself in real time. Next time you are staring at a blank screen, unable to type, ask yourself if you are truly researching or if you are stuck in analysis paralysis. When you are editing a paragraph for the 10th time, ask yourself if you are improving the work or feeding your perfectionism. When you feel the knot of anxiety in your stomach, ask yourself if you are reacting to a real problem or a what-if scenario. And when you are agonizing over a lunch menu, remind yourself that your willpower is too expensive to spend on a sandwich. You must begin to view your mental energy as a currency. Every thought costs money. Overthinking is the act of spending a fortune on things that have no value. However, recognizing these patterns is only the psychological layer. There is a deeper, more physiological layer to this struggle. Your brain is not just a mind, it is an organ. It is a biological machine governed by chemicals and neural pathways. Why does your brain default to these patterns even when you know they are harmful? Why does it feel physically painful to force yourself out of these loops? The answer lies in the hardware of your head. It lies in the stress hormones, the neural grooves, and the conflict between your primitive survival instincts and your modern rational goals. To truly take control, you need to understand the machinery. In the next chapter, we will leave the psychological patterns behind and look directly at the biology of the overthinking brain. We will explore how stress rewires you for hesitation and why your own biology is currently working against your productivity. This is the science behind the struggle. Chapter 3. The science behind overthinking. You have likely experienced the sensation of sitting at your desk with every intention of working, yet finding yourself completely immobile. Your eyes are on the screen, but your mind is thousands of miles away, navigating a labyrinth of potential failures, past mistakes, and future catastrophes. You might call this procrastination or laziness. You might even label it a lack of discipline. But if we look beneath the surface, we find that what is happening is not a moral failing. It is a biological event. To understand why overthinking destroys your productivity, we must stop treating it as a bad habit and start understanding it as a physiological chain reaction. This is Chapter 3, The Science Behind Overthinking. We need to begin with the architecture of your brain. The human brain is a marvel of evolution, but it was not designed for the modern office, the creative studio, or the classroom. It was designed for survival in an environment where the threats were physical and immediate. When you are faced with a complex decision or a high-stakes project, your brain does not naturally categorize this as an administrative task. It categorizes uncertainty as danger. Deep within the center of your brain lies the amygdala. This is your threat detection center. It is ancient, fast, and incredibly powerful. Its job is to scan the environment for anything that might cause you harm. In the ancestral environment, harm meant a predator, a rival tribe, or a scarcity of food. Today, the amygdala has not updated its software. It perceives social rejection, failure at work, or an ambiguous email from a boss with the same level of alarm as it would a tiger in the bushes. When you start overthinking, you are essentially triggering this alarm system. You encounter a problem. You do not have an immediate solution. This uncertainty signals a potential threat to your ego, your status, or your livelihood. The amygdala activates. It initiates the fight, flight, or freeze response. This is where the science of productivity collapses. In a state of high alert, your brain shifts resources. It pulls energy away from the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the CEO of your brain. It is responsible for logic, reasoning, long-term planning, and impulse control. It is the part of you that writes code, drafts essays, and makes strategic business decisions. But the prefrontal cortex is expensive to run. It requires a massive amount of glucose and oxygen. When the amygdala sounds the alarm, the brain decides that survival is more important than your spreadsheet. It creates a functional disconnect. The rational part of your brain goes offline, or at least dims significantly, while the emotional, reactive part of your brain lights up. This is the physiological basis of analysis paralysis. You are physically incapable of complex, nuanced thought because your biology is preparing you to run away or fight for your life. You are stuck in a loop of trying to solve a logical problem with an emotional toolset. This internal conflict triggers a chemical cascade that wreaks havoc on your energy levels. When the threat response is activated, your adrenal glands release adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline increases your heart rate and blood pressure. It is meant to give you a burst of energy to escape danger, but you are sitting in a chair. You are not running, you are stewing. That energy has nowhere to go. It manifests as jitteriness, leg bouncing, and a feeling of intense internal pressure. Then comes cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Cortisol is useful in short bursts, but when you are trapped in a cycle of overthinking, you are bathing your brain in cortisol for hours at a time. This has a corrosive effect on your cognitive abilities. High levels of cortisol impair the hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with memory and learning. This is why, when you are overthinking a project, you often forget basic details or struggle to recall information you definitely know. You feel brain fog. You feel slow. This chemical cocktail creates what we call the fatigue loop. Your brain is revving its engine in neutral. It is consuming vast amounts of glucose to fuel these worry loops and this stress response. You might find that after 2 hours of overthinking, you feel more exhausted than if you had done 8 hours of manual labor. That exhaustion is real. It is metabolic. You have depleted your neural energy reserves on a threat that does not exist. Once your energy is depleted, your resistance to overthinking drops even further. The prefrontal cortex needs energy to regulate emotions and override the fear response. When you are tired, the CEO of your brain is asleep at the wheel. The amygdala takes full control. This is why overthinking tends to get worse late at night or when you are burnt out. You simply lack the biological fuel to tell your brain to stop. But the science of overthinking goes deeper than just immediate chemistry. We must talk about neuroplasticity. This is a term that gets thrown around a lot in self-help circles, but its implications for overthinking are profound and somewhat terrifying. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. It is how we learn skills. If you practice the piano every day, the area of your brain responsible for finger movement and auditory processing gets stronger and more efficient. The problem is that your brain does not distinguish between a good skill and a bad habit. It simply reinforces what you repeat. Every time you engage in a cycle of overthinking, you are training your brain. You are strengthening the neural pathways associated with worry and rumination. You are digging a trench in your mind. Imagine a field of tall grass. The first time you walk through it, the path is difficult and unclear. But if you walk that same path every day, the grass gets trampled down. A dirt path forms. Eventually, it becomes the easiest route to take. This is what happens when you overthink. You are creating a path of least resistance for your thoughts. If you spend 3 hours a day worrying about what people think of your work, you are physically wiring your brain to be hypervigilant about social judgment. You are building a superhighway for anxiety. The more you do it, the easier it becomes to do it again. The neurons that fire together wire together. Eventually, overthinking becomes your default state. You do not even have to try. Your brain automatically slides into that groove because it is the most well-traveled road on your mental map. This explains why chronic overthinkers feel like they cannot stop even when they want to. It is not just a thought pattern anymore. It is a biological structure. You have built a brain that is optimized for worry. Reversing this requires active, difficult cognitive effort, which brings us back to the energy problem. We also have to consider the conflict between emotional and rational thinking processing. This is often described as the conflict between the limbic system and the neocortex. The limbic system is older, faster, and louder. It operates on binary terms: safe or unsafe, good or bad, friend or foe. The neocortex is slower, nuanced, and quieter. When you overthink, you are often trying to use the neocortex to solve a problem created by the limbic system. Your emotions scream that a task is terrifying. Your logic whispers that it is just a simple email. The reason the logic fails to calm you down is that these two systems do not speak the same language. You cannot logic your way out of a physiological fear response. This creates a phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. You hold two opposing beliefs simultaneously. You know you are capable, but you feel incompetent. You know the task is small, but it feels insurmountable. This dissonance creates psychological friction. It is painful. To alleviate this pain, the brain seeks a third option. If it cannot fight the task and it cannot flee the building, it chooses distraction. This is where the science of overthinking transitions into the science of procrastination. Your brain desperately wants to lower the cortisol levels. It wants a dopamine hit to counteract the stress. So, it directs you to pick up your phone. It directs you to check social media. It directs you to do easy, low-value tasks, like organizing your desktop icons. This provides temporary relief. The threat is gone. The cortisol dips, but the project remains. As soon as you look back at the work, the alarm triggers again, often louder this time, because now you have the added pressure of lost time. The cycle reinforces itself. There is also the role of the default mode network, or DMN. This is a network of interacting brain regions that is active when you are not focused on the outside world. It is the network responsible for daydreaming, recalling memories, and envisioning the future. In a healthy state, the DMN allows for creativity and planning. But in the overthinker, the DMN becomes hyperactive. When you try to focus on a task, you are attempting to activate the task-positive network. These two networks are generally anti-correlated, meaning when one is up, the other is down. However, for people who struggle with overthinking, the default mode network fails to shut down completely when they try to work. You are trying to focus on the data in front of you, but your background processing is still running simulations of future arguments or past embarrassments. It is like trying to have a conversation in a room where a television is blaring at full volume. You are constantly battling your own background noise. This split attention drastically reduces your cognitive capacity. You are operating at 50% efficiency because half of your brain power is being siphoned off by this wandering, worrying network. Understanding this science is vital because it shifts the blame. You are not lazy. You are caught in a neurobiological loop. Your amygdala is hijacking your prefrontal cortex. Your hormones are depleting your energy. Your neural pathways are entrenching the habit. And your brain networks are fighting for dominance. This physical reality is why simple advice like just do it or stop worrying rarely works. You cannot simply wish away a cortisol spike. You cannot instantly rewire a neural pathway that has been reinforced for years. You are fighting biology. However, biology is not destiny. The same neuroplasticity that got you into this mess can get you out of it. The brain is adaptable, but before we can begin the process of rewiring, we have to acknowledge the damage that has already been done. We have looked at the biological mechanism, the chemistry, and the wiring. But what does this do to your emotional landscape? How does this constant state of biological alarm translate into your daily feelings of worth and confidence? When the brain is trapped in this survival mode, it does not just kill your productivity. It begins to erode your emotional stability. The anxiety shifts from a temporary state to a permanent trait. The frustration turns inward. You begin to doubt your own mind. The science tells us that overthinking is a mechanism of protection that has malfunctioned. It is your brain trying to keep you safe from uncertainty, but in doing so, it locks you in a cage of fear. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore the emotional toll of this cage. We will look at how the constant firing of these stress pathways impacts your anxiety levels, your self-esteem, and your relationships with others. We have diagnosed the hardware problem. Now we must look at the software glitch. We must understand how this biological storm manifests as the heavy, suffocating cloud of doubt that hangs over your head every single day. The science is clear. Your brain is reacting to a false alarm. The question is, how do we turn it off? But before we can answer that, we must fully understand the cost of letting it ring. Chapter 4. The Emotional Toll. We have peeled back the layers of your biology and looked at the raw mechanics of the brain. We have seen how neurons fire and how chemicals like cortisol surge through your veins when you overthink. That was the hardware. Now we must turn our attention to the software. We must examine the subjective experience of living inside a mind that never sleeps. This is Chapter 4, The emotional toll. It is easy to categorize overthinking as a purely intellectual problem. We treat it like a computer that is processing too much data. We assume that if we could just organize the files or upgrade the processor, the problem would vanish. But overthinking is not a sterile activity. It is messy. It is heavy. It carries a profound emotional weight that accumulates over days and weeks and years. The tragedy of the overthinker is not just lost time, it is lost joy. When you spend your days trapped in a cycle of relentless analysis, your emotional landscape begins to change. The first and most obvious inhabitant of this landscape is anxiety. But this is not the sharp panic of a sudden emergency. It is a low and constant hum in the background of your life. It is the white noise of worry. You might think you are simply planning for the future. You tell yourself that you are being responsible by considering every possible outcome. But psychologically speaking, you are training your brain to live in a state of perpetual threat. Every time you vividly imagine a project failing or a conversation going wrong, your body reacts as if that failure is happening right now. You are emotionally experiencing catastrophes that have never occurred. You are mourning losses that are purely hypothetical. This creates a state of chronic emotional fatigue. You wake up tired, not because you exerted yourself physically, but because you spent the night fighting battles in your head. This anxiety inevitably breeds frustration. This is a very specific type of frustration. It is not directed at the world. It is directed inward. There is a distinct psychological pain in knowing exactly what you need to do, but finding yourself unable to do it. You see the path clearly. You have the skills. You have the desire. Yet you remain frozen. This gap between your capability and your action becomes a breeding ground for self-loathing. You begin to resent your own mind. You might find yourself thinking that you are broken or lazy or undisciplined. You become your own harshest critic. The internal dialogue shifts from curiosity to condemnation. As this frustration mounts, it begins to erode the foundation of your character. It eats away at your self-confidence. Confidence is not a personality trait that you are born with. It is a psychological muscle that is built through action. Every time you make a decision and act on it, you deposit a coin into your bank of self-trust. You prove to yourself that you are an agent of change in your own life. Overthinking stops this transaction. When you hesitate, you vote against yourself. When you delay a decision for fear of making a mistake, you are essentially telling your subconscious that you do not trust your own judgment. Do this enough times and your self-esteem begins to crumble. You start seeking validation from external sources because you have lost faith in your internal compass. You ask 5 different friends for advice on a simple email. You research a minor purchase for 3 weeks because you are terrified of regret. This is the death of confidence. It is the slow and painful realization that you are no longer the captain of your own ship. This internal collapse does not stay contained within your skull. It ripples outward. It spills over into the way you interact with the people around you. The emotional toll of overthinking is a poison to relationships and teamwork. Consider the dynamic of a team at work or a partnership at home. When you are caught in a mental loop, you are not truly present. You might be sitting at the dinner table, but your mind is replaying a meeting from 3 hours ago. You are analyzing the tone of your boss or the wording of a memo. Your partner speaks to you and you nod, but you are not there. You are absent. This creates an emotional distance that is hard to bridge. People can feel when you are not with them. They perceive it as disinterest or detachment. Furthermore, overthinking makes you reactive rather than responsive. Because your baseline stress level is elevated by all this mental churning, you have a shorter fuse. You might snap at a colleague not because of what they did, but because their interruption broke your fragile concentration. You interpret neutral comments as personal attacks. This is a classic psychological projection. Because you are constantly critiquing yourself, you assume everyone else is critiquing you too. You read between lines that do not exist. You analyze a text message for hidden meanings until you have invented a conflict out of thin air. In a professional setting, this makes you a bottleneck. Your need for certainty before acting slows down the entire team. Your fear of making the wrong choice looks like incompetence to those who are waiting for your lead. You might think you are being thorough, but to others you seem indecisive. This damages your professional reputation, which in turn feeds the cycle of anxiety and self-doubt. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You worry so much about not being good enough that your worry makes you less effective. Then there is the emotional toll of the dreaded imposter syndrome. High achievers are particularly prone to this. The more you think, the more you realize how much you do not know. The overthinker looks at their success and thinks it was a fluke. They analyze their achievements to death until they convince themselves that they just got lucky. They live in constant fear of being found out. They believe that sooner or later, everyone will realize they are a fraud. This belief is not based on reality. It is a distortion caused by an hyperactive critical mind. It robs you of the satisfaction of a job well done. You cannot celebrate a win because you are already obsessing over how you might screw up the next challenge. But perhaps the heaviest emotional burden is the feeling of being stuck. There is a specific kind of melancholy that comes from wasted potential. You know you are capable of more. You have ideas that could change your career, or art, that could move people, or business plans that could succeed. But they live and die inside your head. They never cross the threshold into reality. This feeling of stuckness is not just about a lack of movement. It is about a lack of growth. Human beings have a fundamental psychological need for progress. We need to feel that we are moving forward, that we are evolving. Overthinking traps us in stasis. We run on a treadmill of thought, expending massive amounts of energy but going nowhere. We age, but we do not advance. Over time, this leads to a deep sense of resignation. You begin to accept this paralysis as your identity. You say things like, "I am just an anxious person," or "I am just not good at decisions." You internalize the struggle. You stop fighting the current and start drowning in it. This is the point where overthinking transitions from a bad habit to a lifestyle. It colors every memory and every hope. You look back at your past and see only the mistakes you analyze to death. You look forward to the future and see only the risks you are trying to calculate. The present moment is lost entirely. This emotional toll is invisible to the outside world. You might look calm. You might look high-functioning. You might be meeting your deadlines and smiling at your neighbors. But inside there is a storm. There is a grief for the person you could be if you could just get out of your own way. It is important to understand that these emotions are not character flaws. They are symptoms. They are the natural byproducts of a mind that has turned against itself. The anxiety is a symptom of a brain that perceives uncertainty as danger. The frustration is a symptom of energy that has no outlet. The lack of confidence is a symptom of atrophy from lack of decision-making. Recognizing this is the first step toward healing. You must stop judging yourself for feeling this way. You must stop analyzing your anxiety, which only creates more anxiety. You have to see the emotional toll for what it is. It is a signal. It is your mind crying out for a different way of operating. It is a warning light on the dashboard telling you that the engine is overheating. We often try to solve emotional problems with more thinking. We try to logic our way out of fear. We try to rationalize our way out of insecurity. But you cannot solve a problem with the same mechanism that created it. You cannot think your way out of overthinking. The exit door is not found in the mind. It is found in action. As we move toward the solutions in the coming chapters, keep this emotional landscape in mind. Understand that the goal is not just to be more productive in a mechanical sense. The goal is to reclaim your peace. The goal is to lift the heavy blanket of worry and let yourself breathe again. The goal is to rebuild the trust between you and yourself. The pain you feel is real. The exhaustion is valid. The frustration is justified. But it is not permanent. This emotional state is maintained by a specific set of mental habits, and habits can be broken. The neural pathways that carry these heavy emotions can be rewired. You are not doomed to live in this loop forever. In the next chapter, we will stop admiring the problem and start dismantling it. We will look at how to break the cycle. But for now, sit with this realization. Acknowledge the cost. Look at the price you have been paying in happiness and connection and self-worth. Let that recognition be the fuel that drives you to change. You have analyzed enough. You have worried enough. It is time to step out of the shadow of your own mind and back into the light of the real world. The emotional toll is high, but you do not have to keep paying it. The ledger can be closed. The first step to breaking free is simply admitting that the cost is too high. You are ready to stop paying with your peace of mind. You are ready to stop sacrificing your confidence on the altar of perfectionism. The emotions you feel are heavy, but they are not you. They are the baggage you have been carrying. It is time to set it down. Let us prepare to shift gears. We have understood the enemy. We have mapped the terrain of the struggle. We have felt the weight of the burden. Now we turn our eyes to the horizon. We turn our attention to the strategies and the tools that will cut the chains. The analysis phase is over. The liberation phase is about to begin. Chapter 5. Breaking the Cycle. You have spent the last 4 chapters understanding the architecture of your own prison. You know the enemy is not the world around you, but the processing unit inside your skull. You understand the chemical cascades of cortisol and the emotional weight of anxiety. You have seen how analysis paralysis disguises itself as intelligence, but understanding the trap is not the same as escaping it. You can study the lock on a cell door for a lifetime and still die inside the cell. Knowledge without application is just another form of overthinking. It is just another heavy item to carry in your mental inventory. Now we arrive at the turning point. This is where we shift from diagnosis to surgery. This is Chapter 5, Breaking the Cycle. To break a cycle implies that the momentum is currently working against you. A cycle is a psychological groove. It is a neural pathway that has been reinforced thousands of times. Your brain prefers this path because it is efficient. It requires zero energy to slip back into worry. It requires massive energy to carve a new path of action. The moment you try to change, you will feel resistance. That resistance is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that the cycle is being challenged. The first step in breaking this chain is not action. It is awareness. This sounds simple, but it is deceptively difficult. Most of the time, you are not observing your thoughts. You are inside them. You are the thinker and the thought simultaneously. You are sweeping down the river of your own anxiety, and you cannot see the banks. Breaking the cycle requires a psychological split. You must cultivate a part of your mind that stands apart from the noise. This is often called the observer self or metacognition. It works like this. You are sitting at your desk. You feel the familiar tightening in your chest. Your mind starts racing about a project deadline. It jumps to a mistake you made 3 years ago. It jumps to a catastrophic future where you are fired. In the old cycle, you would engage with these thoughts. You would argue with them. You would try to solve the imaginary catastrophe. The new approach is different. You stop. You mentally step back. You label the event. You say to yourself, I am having a thought about failure. You do not say, I am a failure. You do not say, I will fail. You simply acknowledge the data stream. I am experiencing anxiety. By labeling the emotion and the thought, you separate your identity from the mental noise. You create a tiny gap between the stimulus and your reaction. That gap is where your freedom lives. Once you have established this gap, you need a tool to widen it. This brings us to the concept of the pattern interrupt. Your brain is running a script. To stop the script, you cannot just use willpower. Willpower is a finite resource, and overthinking drains it rapidly. You need a physical or environmental jolt to reset the system. When you feel the loop tightening, you must physically change your state. If you are sitting down, stand up. If you are inside, walk outside. The brain associates your physical posture and your environment with your mental state. By radically changing your physiology, you force the brain to reassess the situation. This is not magic. It is biology. You are signaling to your nervous system that the threat is not immediate. You are engaging the motor cortex, which pulls resources away from the overactive amygdala. A simple walk or a change of room can shatter a mental loop that might have lasted hours. But interrupting the loop is only a temporary fix. You have disrupted the signal, but the noise is still there, waiting to return. You need to purge the system. This is where we deploy one of the most potent psychological tools available to the modern mind. We call it cognitive offloading. You might know it as journaling. Do not mistake this for keeping a diary of your feelings. This is not about sentimentality. This is about forensic analysis. When thoughts stay in your head, they are nebulous. They have no form and no boundaries. A vague fear of failure can expand until it fills the entire room. It feels infinite. But the moment you write that fear down on a piece of paper, it becomes finite. It is trapped in ink. It has a beginning and an end. The practice is simple. When the overthinking surges, open a notebook. Write down exactly what you are worried about. Be specific. Do not write, "I am stressed." Write, "I am afraid that if I send this email, the client will reject the proposal, and I will look incompetent." Once it is written, read it back. Seen objectively on the page, most catastrophic thoughts look ridiculous. They lose their emotional charge. You are moving the processing from your emotional brain to your analytical brain. You are turning a monster into a sentence. Once it is on paper, your brain realizes it does not need to keep looping the thought to remember it. The information is safe. The loop can relax. Now that we have cleared the immediate static, we must address the root cause of the paralysis. We overthink because we lack a hierarchy of value. To the anxious mind, every task feels equally critical. Replying to an email feels as life-threatening as finishing the major project. This flatness of priority creates chaos. If everything is important, then nothing is important. The brain freezes because it cannot determine the correct first step. We must introduce the psychological discipline of prioritization. This is not about time management. This is about emotional management. You must ruthlessly filter the signal from the noise. You have to accept a painful truth. You cannot do everything. You will drop balls. The goal is to identify which balls are made of rubber and which are made of glass. Rubber balls bounce back. These are the emails, the minor errands, the social obligations. If you drop them, nothing breaks. Glass balls are your health, your core relationships, and your primary work mission. If you drop these, they shatter. Overthinking happens when you treat rubber balls like glass balls. You agonize over a text message as if your career depends on it. To break the cycle, pick one glass ball. Just one. Identify the single most important action that moves the needle today. Ignore everything else until that is done. This narrows your focus. It relieves the brain of the burden of multitasking. When you give your mind a single clear target, it calms down. Complexity breeds anxiety. Simplicity breeds action. However, even with a clear priority, the perfectionist mind will try to sabotage you. It will say, "I cannot start until I am ready." It will say, "I need more information." This is where we introduce the concept of time boxing. Overthinking expands to fill the time available. If you give yourself a week to write a report, you will spend 6 days worrying and 1 day writing. If you give yourself 2 hours, you will spend 2 hours writing. This is a variation of Parkinson's law. To break the cycle of perfectionism, you must impose artificial constraints. Time boxing is the practice of setting a strict timer for a task. You are not deciding to finish the task perfectly. You are deciding to work on it for 45 minutes. That is it. The goal shifts from the terrifying quality of the output to the manageable quantity of the time. You tell yourself, "I do not need to produce a masterpiece. I just need to produce 30 minutes of work." This lowers the psychological barrier to entry. It tricks the amygdala. The stakes feel lower. And once you start, the momentum takes over. The hardest part of any task is the first 2 minutes. This is the friction point. Overthinking is just the friction preventing you from starting. Time boxing greases the wheels. It forces you to bypass the debate in your head and engage with reality. We must also address the mental environment you are cultivating. We live in an economy of distraction. Your attention is being sold to the highest bidder. Every notification, every breaking news alert, every social media scroll adds data to your already overloaded system. You are pouring fuel on the fire of your overthinking. Breaking the cycle requires periods of sensory deprivation. You need to reclaim your headspace. This brings us to mindfulness. I am not asking you to become a monk or retreat to a mountain. I am asking you to practice the skill of returning. Mindfulness is simply the act of noticing your attention has drifted and bringing it back to the present moment. Think of it as a rep in the gym. Every time you catch your mind wandering into the future and you gently pull it back to the present, that is one repetition. You are strengthening the muscle of focus. You are training your brain that you are in charge of the spotlight. You choose where the light shines. In the grip of overthinking, you are living entirely in the hypothetical future. You are hallucinating tragedies that have not happened. Mindfulness anchors you in the biological present. In this exact second, as you listen to my voice, are you okay? Is there a tiger in the room? Is the building collapsing? The answer is almost always no. In the immediate present, there is rarely a problem. There is only a task to be done or a breath to be taken. Overthinking cannot survive in the present moment. It needs the oxygen of the future to burn. Deny it that oxygen. Finally, we must discuss the ultimate antidote to overthinking. Action. We tend to think that we need to feel confident before we take action. We wait for the feeling of readiness. This is a deception. The feeling of readiness does not come before the action. It comes after. Confidence is the result of seeing yourself do hard things. You cannot think your way out of a thinking problem. You have to act your way out. Action provides new data. When you are stuck in your head, you are simulating reality based on old fears. When you take action, you collide with actual reality. You realize the email was not that scary. You realize the project is not that impossible. You realize the mistake was fixable. The cycle of overthinking is a loop of fear. The cycle of productivity is a loop of feedback. You try something. It works or it fails. You learn. You try again. This is how the human brain is designed to learn. It is not designed to simulate the world perfectly in isolation. It is designed to interact with the world physically. So how do we synthesize this into a strategy you can use right now? First, recognize the loop. Catch yourself staring at the wall or rereading the same sentence. Say to yourself, I am overthinking. Second, interrupt the pattern. Stand up. Shake your hands out. Drink a glass of cold water. Change the sensory input. Third, externalize the load. Write the specific worry down. Look at it. Dismantle it with logic. Fourth, narrow the field. Choose one single task, just one. Ignore the rest of the mountain. Fifth, set a timer. Give yourself 20 minutes. Commit only to the time, not the result. Sixth, engage. Do the work badly if you have to. A messy draft is better than a perfect void. Movement creates clarity. Breaking the cycle is not a one-time event. You will not be cured of overthinking overnight. You will fall back into the trap tomorrow. You will fall back into it next week. That is okay. The goal is not to never overthink again. The goal is to shorten the lag time. In the past, you might have been stuck for 3 weeks. Now you catch it in 3 days. Eventually, you catch it in 3 hours. Then 3 minutes. You become faster at the reset. You become more resilient. You stop identifying as an overthinker and start identifying as someone who takes action despite the noise. You are rewriting the code of your operating system. You are moving from a passive victim of your own intelligence to an active director of your focus. It is uncomfortable, it is tiring, but it is the only way to reclaim your potential. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the specific tools that can support this new operating system. We will move from internal psychology to external systems. We will discuss the daily habits and digital tools that act as guardrails for your mind, preventing you from falling off the cliff in the first place. You have the strategy. You know how to break the cycle. Now let us look at how to build the infrastructure that keeps it broken. Chapter 6. Tools for the Overthinker. We have arrived at a critical juncture in our investigation of the overactive mind. In the previous chapter, we discussed breaking the cycle through internal awareness and shifting your perspective. But we must acknowledge a hard truth about human psychology. Willpower is a finite resource. You cannot simply think your way out of overthinking every single time. The cognitive load is too heavy and the neural pathways of habit are too deep. To truly reclaim your productivity, you need more than just good intentions or a moment of clarity. You need an external architecture. You need scaffolding that holds your mind in place when it tries to wander off into the abyss of analysis paralysis. This is where we talk about tools. When we speak of tools for the overthinker, we are not talking about buying a shiny new planner or downloading the latest productivity app that promises to organize your entire life in 3 clicks. That impulse is actually part of the problem. It is the desire for a magic pill. Instead, we are looking at tools as psychological anchors. We are looking for systems that reduce cognitive load and bypass the brain's tendency to complicate the simple. We need to examine how specific habits, planning methods, and digital systems interact with your neurochemistry to calm the noise. Let us begin with the psychology of daily habits. For the overthinker, every unmade decision is a leak in the hull of their ship. Your brain burns glucose and mental energy every time you have to choose what to wear, what to eat, or what task to start first. This is decision fatigue. By the time you sit down to do the deep work, your executive function is already exhausted from navigating the trivia of the morning. The tool here is the ritual. A ritual is different from a routine. A routine is just a sequence of actions. A ritual is a sequence of actions imbued with the psychological intention of signaling a shift in state. When you automate the first 90 minutes of your day, you are effectively putting blinders on a racehorse. You are removing the option to overthink. If you wake up and have to ask yourself what you should do first, you have already lost the battle. The hesitation allows the anxiety to creep in. You must design a protocol that requires zero thought. You wake up, you drink water, you move your body, you sit at the desk. There is no space in that sequence for the question of whether you feel like it or whether you are ready. The habit acts as an override for the emotional brain. It engages the basal ganglia, which governs automatic behaviors, and bypasses the prefrontal cortex where your overthinking lives. You are using your biology against itself. Now we move to the treacherous terrain of planning. There is a very distinct psychological trap here known as productive procrastination. For the overthinker, planning feels safer than doing. When you are planning, you are in the realm of the theoretical. In the theoretical world, everything works. The timeline is perfect. The outcome is guaranteed. The risk is zero. It gives you a hit of dopamine that mimics the feeling of achievement. Your brain feels like it has done work, but in reality you have only built a castle in the clouds. To counter this, we must distinguish between planning and obsessing. Planning is drawing a map. Obsessing is drawing the map over and over again because you are afraid to step onto the terrain. The tool you need to adopt is the concept of minimum viable planning. You do not need the perfect plan. You need a plan that is just good enough to get you to the next step. Psychologically, this requires you to embrace uncertainty. A rigorous 60-page plan is often just a security blanket. It is an attempt to control variables that are uncontrollable. The antidote is time boxing. This is a technique where you assign a fixed period of time to a task, and when the timer goes off, you stop. You move on. This introduces artificial scarcity. When you have all day to write a report, your brain will take all day to worry about it. This is Parkinson's law, which states that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. But for the overthinker, it is worse. The worry expands to fill the time. By restricting the time, you force the brain into a mode of execution rather than evaluation. You force yourself to make imperfect decisions because the clock is ticking. You are prioritizing momentum over precision. Let us discuss the concept of cognitive offloading. This is perhaps the most powerful psychological tool in your arsenal. The human brain is designed for processing information, not for storing it. When you try to keep your to-do list, your grocery list, your project ideas, and your anxieties all swirling around in your working memory, you create a state of constant high alert. The brain loops on these items because it is terrified of forgetting them. This is known as the Zeigarnik effect, which describes how we remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. Your brain keeps the tab open and it drains your battery. The solution is to build a second brain. This is a system of externalizing your thoughts. It does not matter if you use a fancy digital database or a pocket notebook. The medium is irrelevant. The psychological mechanism is what matters. When you write a thought down, you are telling your amygdala that it is safe to let go. The information is captured, it is secure. You do not need to expend energy holding it. However, there is a danger here. Many overthinkers turn their note-taking systems into another form of hoarding. They collect articles they will never read and ideas they will never execute. This is digital gluttony. To make this tool work, you need a system of review. A capture system without a processing system is just a graveyard of good intentions. You must have a time, perhaps once a week, where you review what you have captured. You delete what is irrelevant. You schedule what is actionable. You file away what is reference. This closes the loop. It proves to your subconscious mind that the system works so your brain can finally relax. We must also address the digital environment itself. Our modern tools are often engines of distraction designed to fragment our attention. For the overthinker, the smartphone is a slot machine of anxiety. Every notification is a potential problem to solve or a judgment to face. The constant influx of information triggers the desire to analyze. You read a headline and you spiral. You see an email and you draft a response in your head for 3 hours before typing it. The tool here is digital minimalism. You must ruthlessly curate your inputs. This is not about being a Luddite. It is about protecting your cognitive bandwidth. Turn off non-essential notifications. Use apps that block distracting websites during deep work sessions. Create friction between you and the sources of your overthinking. If you have to log in and type a password to check social media, you are less likely to do it impulsively than if the app is open on your home screen. You are adding a layer of conscious choice to an unconscious habit. Now we arrive at the tool that many analytical minds resist the most. Silence. We often think of meditation as a spiritual practice or a relaxation technique, but for the purposes of productivity, we should view it as cognitive training. It is the gym for your attention span. The problem with the overthinking mind is that it fuses with its thoughts. You have a thought about failure, and you become the failure. You have a thought about the future, and you live in the future. You lose contact with the present reality where actual work happens. Mindfulness is the tool that allows you to uncouple from the train of thought. When you sit in silence and observe your breath or your bodily sensations, you are practicing a very specific skill. You are practicing the art of noticing a distraction and choosing not to follow it. That is the exact same muscle you need when you are working on a project, and the urge to check your email arises. That is the same muscle you need when you are in a meeting and you start worrying about what you said 5 minutes ago. You are training the observer self. You are learning to stand on the bank of the river and watch the water flow by rather than drowning in the current. This is not about clearing your mind. That is impossible. It is about changing your relationship with the contents of your mind. Consider the technique of journaling. This is distinct from the note-taking we discussed earlier. Note-taking is for facts and tasks. Journaling is for emotions and loops. When you are stuck in a mental loop, the thoughts tend to be circular and vague. They repeat the same terrifying phrases. I am not good enough. This is going to fail. What if they judge me? When you write these thoughts down on paper, you force them to become linear. You force them to submit to the rules of language and grammar. You drag the monster out from under the bed and into the light. Often when you see the thought written down, it loses its power. You can look at it objectively. You can ask, is this true? You can look for evidence. Writing engages the analytical left hemisphere of the brain, which can help dampen the emotional firing of the right hemisphere. It is a form of self-administered cognitive behavioral therapy. Let us synthesize how these tools work together in a practical scenario. Imagine you have a large, daunting project due. The old overthinking pattern would be to stare at the screen, worry about the outcome, browse the internet for inspiration, get overwhelmed by the possibilities, and end the day exhausted but unproductive. Now apply the tools. You start the day with a ritual that puts you in the chair without question. You use cognitive offloading to dump all your worries and tasks onto a list so your working memory is clear. You use time boxing to give yourself 45 minutes to produce a rough draft, knowing that it does not have to be perfect. You turn on a website blocker to prevent the digital escape. And when the panic rises, as it inevitably will, you use the mindfulness technique to notice the physical sensation of anxiety in your chest, acknowledge it, and gently return your attention to the task. This is not magic. It is engineering. You are engineering an environment and a workflow that accounts for your psychological vulnerabilities. You are accepting that your brain is prone to overheating, and you are installing a cooling system. The most important tool of all is self-compassion. This sounds soft, but it is strictly pragmatic. When an overthinker slips up, when they waste an hour or a day, their default response is self-criticism. They beat themselves up. This guilt creates more stress. The stress releases cortisol. The cortisol inhibits executive function. And the inhibited executive function leads to more overthinking and procrastination. It is a feedback loop from hell. The only way to break that specific loop is to forgive yourself immediately. You acknowledge the slip, you analyze the trigger, and you reset. You do not compound the error by ruminating on it. You treat your mind like a puppy that has wandered off the path. You do not kick the puppy, you gently guide it back. This resilience is a trainable skill. As you begin to implement these tools, remember that the goal is not to become a robot. The goal is to clear the interference so that your actual intelligence can shine through. Overthinking is not a sign of stupidity. It is often a sign of a high-functioning engine that is stuck in neutral. These tools are the transmission system that allows you to shift into gear. You do not need to adopt every single one of these strategies tomorrow. That would be another form of overthinking. Pick one. Perhaps you start with the brain dump. Perhaps you start with the morning ritual. Experiment with it. Observe the data. Does it make you feel lighter? Does it help you move? We are moving from a state of being victims of our own psychology to being the architects of it. We are acknowledging that while we cannot control every thought that pops into our heads, we can control the environment in which those thoughts exist. We can control the systems we use to process them. In the next chapter, we will take these concepts and apply them to the ultimate test, which is your ability to focus deeply for extended periods. We will look at how to train the brain to shift from reactive thinking to proactive thinking. We will explore how to build the mental resilience required to stay with a difficult problem without fleeing into the comfort of distraction. But for now, look at your desk. Look at your phone. Look at your calendar. Are they helping you focus, or are they feeding the noise? The choice of which tools you allow into your life is a choice about what kind of mind you want to cultivate. Chapter 7. Mental Training for Focus. We have arrived at a critical juncture in your journey toward mental clarity. You now understand the science of why your brain loops. You have identified the emotional toll it takes on your life. We have even discussed the external tools and digital systems that can act as scaffolding for your day. But tools are useless if the hand that wields them is shaking. Apps and planners are external solutions. Focus is an internal discipline. Welcome to Chapter 7. This is Mental Training for Focus. This chapter is about conditioning your mind. Just as an athlete trains their muscles to withstand physical stress, you must train your cognitive faculties to withstand the urge to overthink. The default state of an untrained mind is chaos. It seeks the path of least resistance, which ironically often leads to the most mental anguish. Overthinking is the brain's way of looking busy without actually doing the work. To stop this, we have to move from a state of passivity to a state of active command. Let us begin with the most fundamental shift you need to make. We must move you from reactive thinking to proactive thinking. Most overthinkers live in a permanent state of reaction. A thought pops into your head. It might be a worry about an email you sent yesterday. Immediately, your brain reacts. It grabs that thought and begins to dissect it. Then another thought intrudes. Perhaps it is a reminder of a deadline. Your brain reacts again. You feel a surge of cortisol. You flinch. You abandon the email worry to obsess over the deadline. Then a notification sounds on your phone. You react again. This is the pinball effect. You are the ball, bouncing violently between the bumpers of your own anxieties. You are not choosing where to go. You are simply ricocheting off whatever stimulus hits you hardest in the moment. Proactive thinking is different. It is the ability to stand apart from the noise. In psychology, we call this metacognition, which is essentially thinking about your thinking. When a worry enters the mind of a proactive thinker, they do not immediately engage with it. They observe it. They pause. They ask a simple question. Is this thought useful to the task at hand? If the answer is no, they do not fight it. They simply let it sit in the waiting room of their mind while they return to their work. This sounds simple, but it requires immense psychological effort. It means you must become comfortable with unresolved tension. Overthinkers hate tension. You want to solve every potential problem immediately so you can relax. But mental training teaches you that you can be productive even while tension exists. You can write that report even if you are worried about your bank account. You can finish that design even if you are unsure if the client will like it. You learn to compartmentalize not out of denial, but out of discipline. The second pillar of this training involves developing decision-making confidence. Overthinking is often a symptom of a deep-seated lack of trust in yourself. You overthink because you are terrified of making the wrong choice. You play out 10 different scenarios because you believe that if you make a mistake, you will not be able to handle the consequences. This is a fragility of the ego. To build focus, you must rebuild self-trust. We do this through a process called decisive velocity. When you are faced with a low-stakes decision, you likely agonize over it. What should you eat for lunch? Which font should you use? How should you phrase this text message? Every minute you spend debating these small things depletes your cognitive resources. The training requires you to artificially shorten the window of deliberation. You must force yourself to choose before you feel ready. This feels dangerous. Your brain will scream that you haven't considered all the angles. You must choose anyway. Why do we do this? We are teaching your brain a new pattern. We are teaching it that the world does not end when you make a suboptimal decision. Let's say you choose the wrong font. What happens? You change it later. Let's say you eat a lunch you didn't enjoy. What happens? You eat something else for dinner. By forcing speed, you expose your brain to the reality that most errors are reversible. As you practice this with small things, a psychological shift occurs. You begin to realize that your ability to correct course is stronger than your ability to predict the future. This is where true confidence comes from. It is not the arrogant belief that you will always be right. It is the quiet knowing that even if you are wrong, you can fix it. Once you trust your ability to fix mistakes, you no longer need to obsess over preventing them. You are free to focus on action. This leads us directly into the third component of your mental training. We must install a new operating system regarding quality. We need to adopt the mindset that done is better than perfect. Perfectionism is the darling of the overthinker. It dresses itself up as high standards. You tell yourself that you care about quality. You tell yourself that you are just being thorough. But psychologically, perfectionism is not about quality. It is about safety. If you never finish the project, no one can judge it. If you keep refining the plan, you never have to face the possibility of failure in the real world. Perfectionism is a shield. It protects your ego from the potential pain of criticism. The problem is that this shield is heavy. It crushes your productivity. It keeps you stuck in the realm of theory, where everything is safe rather than the realm of reality, where things actually happen. To train for focus, you must embrace the concept of the rough draft. You must lower the bar for your initial output. Give yourself permission to produce work that is mediocre. This sounds counterintuitive. Why would you aim for mediocrity? Because you cannot improve something that does not exist. When you are trapped in overthinking, you are trying to edit the work in your head before you have even created it. That is cognitive overload. You are trying to be the creator and the critic simultaneously. No brain can sustain that. Mental training involves separating these two modes. First, you are the creator. Your only job is to get the raw material out of your mind and into the world. It can be messy, it can be flawed, it can be incomplete. Once it is out, then and only then do you switch to the critic mode to refine it. By accepting that the first version will be imperfect, you remove the pressure that causes the paralysis. You release the brake pedal. You allow yourself to flow. You must internalize the truth that imperfection is a prerequisite for success. Every great book started as a terrible draft. Every successful business started as a flawed idea. The people who succeed are not the ones who waited for perfection. They are the ones who had the courage to put something imperfect into the world and then improve it. Now we move to the final component of this chapter. building mental resilience through small, consistent wins. Focus is a muscle, and like any muscle, it fatigues. If you have spent years overthinking, your focus muscle is atrophied. You cannot expect to sit down and concentrate for 4 hours straight on day one. That is like trying to run a marathon after spending 5 years on the couch. You will fail, and that failure will only reinforce your belief that you are broken. We need to rebuild your attention span incrementally. We do this by engineering small wins. This is based on the chemistry of your brain. When you complete a task, your brain releases dopamine. This is a reward chemical. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel capable. Overthinkers rarely get this reward because they rarely finish anything. They have a dozen open loops and no closures. This leads to a chemical deficit. You feel drained and unmotivated because your brain is starving for that sense of completion. To train your mind, you must shrink your targets. Do not aim to finish the whole project today. Aim to write the first paragraph. Aim to send one email. Aim to organize one folder. When you complete that tiny task, take a moment to acknowledge it. Feel the closure. This is a rep for your brain. You are teaching your neural pathways that you are the kind of person who finishes things. Then you do it again. You stack another small win. These small wins create a momentum loop. As you feel more capable, your anxiety decreases. As your anxiety decreases, your capacity for focus increases. You are reversing the downward spiral of overthinking and replacing it with an upward spiral of competence. This requires you to change your definition of success. Success is not finishing the masterpiece in one sitting. Success is showing up and laying one brick. You must also learn to tolerate boredom. This is a crucial part of mental training that is rarely discussed. Overthinking is stressful, yes, but it is also stimulating. It is dramatic. Your mind is racing with catastrophes and scenarios. It is high-voltage entertainment for your brain. Real focus, by comparison, can feel boring. It is quiet. It is repetitive. It is just you and the work. When you first try to focus, your brain will rebel. It will crave the stimulation of the worry loop. It will try to manufacture a crisis just to feel that adrenaline spike. You must recognize this for what it is. It is withdrawal. You are withdrawing from the addiction to mental chaos. When the boredom hits, or the urge to overcheck your phone arises, or the sudden panic about a future event bubbles up, you must hold your ground. This is the resistance training. Every time you feel the urge to drift into a worry loop, and you gently pull your attention back to the task, you're doing a mental push-up. It will be uncomfortable. You will feel an itch in your mind. Do not scratch it. Let the urge be there and work anyway. This is how you build a mind that is invincible, not by eliminating all distracting thoughts, but by stripping them of their power to command you. As we close this chapter on mental training, remember that this is a practice, not a pill. You do not become a focused person overnight. You become a focused person by practicing focus every single day, especially when it is hard. You are shifting your identity. You are no longer the person who drowns in their own thoughts. You are the person who observes those thoughts, acknowledges them, and then gets back to work. You are learning that your mind is a tool to be used, not a master to be obeyed. In the next chapter, we will look at the real world. We will examine case studies of famous figures and ordinary people who face the same mental paralysis you face. We will see how they applied these principles to escape the trap of their own minds and achieve greatness. We will prove to you that this transformation is not just theoretical. It is possible, and it has been done before. You have the tools. You are building the strength. Now let us look at the evidence of what happens when you finally break free. Chapter 8. Case Studies and Real-Life Examples. We have spent the previous chapters dissecting the anatomy of your thoughts. We have mapped the neural pathways of anxiety and identified the chemical signals that keep you frozen. But theory can sometimes feel abstract. It is easy to look at the mechanics of the mind and still feel like your specific struggle is unique. You might believe that your indecision is a personal flaw rather than a psychological mechanism. You might feel that the most successful people in the world operate with a clarity you can never achieve. This chapter is designed to dismantle that belief. The paralysis of the intelligent mind is not a new phenomenon. It is not a symptom of the modern digital age alone, even if technology has amplified it. Throughout history and across high-pressure industries today, the most capable minds often struggle the most with the burden of their own potential. By examining case studies of both famous figures and common modern archetypes, we can see the patterns of overthinking in the wild. We can see how analysis paralysis manifests in reality, and more importantly, how it is dismantled. Let us begin with a historical example that might surprise you. Consider the case of Charles Darwin. When we think of Darwin, we think of a revolutionary genius who changed our understanding of biology. We view him as a figure of immense productivity and consequence, but the psychological reality of his life was far more complex. Darwin was a chronic overthinker. After he returned from his voyage on the Beagle, he had the core ideas for his theory of natural selection. The data was there. The conclusion was rational. The work was essentially done, yet he did not publish. For 20 years, Charles Darwin sat on his theory. He filled notebook after notebook, rechecking facts that were already verified. He engaged in an endless loop of what we now call catastrophic thinking. He was terrified of the social and reputation backlash. He ran mental simulations of every possible counter-argument. This was not just diligence, it was fear masquerading as diligence. The psychological toll on him was severe. Darwin suffered from palpitations, stomach issues, and extreme fatigue. His doctors could never find a physical cause because the cause was psychosomatic. His mind was consuming so much energy processing fear and potential outcomes that his body was paying the price. He was trapped in a perfectionism loop, believing that if he just gathered one more piece of evidence, he could insulate himself from criticism. This is the trap of the intelligent mind. Darwin was not stuck because he knew too little. He was stuck because he could imagine too many futures. So how did he break the loop? He did not solve it through internal willpower alone. He broke the loop because of an external forcing function. Another naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace sent Darwin a letter outlining the exact same theory. Suddenly, the risk of not acting outweighed the risk of acting. The fear of losing his life work overrode the fear of criticism. The lesson here is critical for your own psychological toolkit. Darwin waited for perfect safety, and it never came. He only moved when the pain of stagnation became unbearable. You do not want to wait 20 years to launch your project or make your career pivot. You must recognize that the feeling of needing more information is often a deception of the anxiety center in your brain. Let us move from history to a more metaphorical case study that perfectly illustrates the agony of choice. This is derived from the writings of the poet Sylvia Plath. In her novel The Bell Jar, she describes a psychological state that perfectly mirrors the modern overthinker. She describes sitting in the crotch of a fig tree, starving to death, just because she cannot make up her mind which of the figs she would like to choose. She sees one fig as a happy home and family. Another fig is a famous poet. Another is a brilliant professor. Another is an editor. She sees all these potential lives stripping out before her like ripe figs. But she cannot choose. She sits there paralyzed because choosing one means losing all the rest. And as she sits there, unable to decide, the figs begin to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plop to the ground at her feet. This is the psychology of opportunity cost gone wrong. This is the distinct pain of the modern overthinker who has too many options. You might be a student trying to pick a major. You might be an entrepreneur trying to pick a niche. You freeze because you are trying to preserve every option. You are terrified that choosing path A means the permanent death of path B. The psychological flaw here is the belief that making no choice keeps your options open. The reality is that making no choice is the same as watching the figs rot. The people who overcome this do not make the perfect choice. They make a choice and then make it right through action. They understand that the pain of a wrong decision is less than the pain of the fig tree paralysis, where all potential is lost to time. Now let us look at a modern composite case study. Let us call him Michael. Michael represents a very common profile in the corporate world. He is a mid-level manager seeking a promotion, or perhaps he is a developer working on a side project. Michael is stuck in the research phase. He calls it research, but psychologically it is a safety behavior. He has read every book on the topic. He has listened to every podcast. He has mapped out the perfect strategy in his head, but he has not executed a single tangible task that impacts the real world. When we analyze Michael deeply, we find that his overthinking is a defense mechanism against vulnerability. As long as his project is in his head, it is perfect. It has no flaws. It cannot be judged. The moment he takes action, he exposes his work to reality where it might fail or be criticized. Michael suffers from the spotlight effect. He believes that if he makes a mistake, everyone is watching. His overthinking convinces him that the stakes are life or death. But when Michael finally breaks this cycle, it is usually through a technique we discussed in the previous chapter. He stops trying to do the big thing and starts doing the small thing. We see this in high-performing executives who recover from burnout. They stop trying to solve the entire quarter in one day. They shift their psychological focus from the outcome to the process. Instead of asking, will this project succeed, they ask, can I spend 20 minutes on this document right now? They lower the cognitive barrier to entry. Let us look at another real-world example from the world of creative arts. Consider the story of a writer or an artist who faces the blank page. The blank page is the ultimate trigger for overthinking because it represents infinite possibility. Many successful creatives speak about the concept of the bad draft. This is a vital psychological reframe. The overthinking mind demands that the first output be the final output. It demands perfection on the first try. This creates immense pressure, which leads to procrastination. The most productive creatives explicitly give themselves permission to produce garbage. They separate the creation process from the editing process. This is a profound psychological shift. When you are overthinking, you are trying to be the creator and the critic at the same time. You are trying to write the sentence and judge the sentence simultaneously. This causes a neural traffic jam. By allowing yourself to write a terrible first draft or build a clunky prototype, you silence the critic. You tell your brain that this is not the final version, so the danger is low. This lowers cortisol levels and allows the creative centers of the brain to function. We see this in software development with the concept of the minimum viable product. You do not build the perfect app. You build the version that works, and then you iterate. There is another fascinating aspect of overthinking, found in high-stakes professions like emergency medicine or aviation. In these fields, overthinking can be fatal. Pilots and surgeons are trained to utilize checklists. You might think a checklist is just a piece of paper. Psychologically, it is an external brain. When a crisis hits, the brain floods with adrenaline. This can lead to tunnel vision or analysis paralysis, where the pilot freezes while looking at flashing lights. The checklist overrides the emotional brain. It forces the rational brain to take step 1, then step 2, then step 3. We can apply this to your life. If you find yourself freezing every morning because you are overwhelmed by the complexity of your day, you are behaving like a pilot in a crisis without a checklist. You are relying on your internal executive function, which is already fatigued. The most productive people do not decide what to do in the moment. They decide the night before. They offload the decision-making process to a piece of paper so that when the morning comes, they are simply executing a script. This bypasses the ruminating mind entirely. Let us consider one final case study regarding social overthinking. This affects how we interact with colleagues, teams, and relationships. Imagine a person named Sarah. After a meeting, Sarah replays every conversation in her head. She analyzes the tone of her boss. She worries that her comment was misinterpreted. She spends 3 hours that evening stewing in anxiety. This is rumination. The breakthrough for people like Sarah often comes from a psychological concept called reality testing. Overthinking is usually a closed-loop system. You are talking to yourself about yourself. The data is corrupted by your own insecurities. People who break this cycle learn to seek external data. Instead of guessing what her boss thought, Sarah learns to ask. She sends a quick message asking for feedback. Usually the response is positive or neutral. The catastrophic scenario she built in her head existed only in her head. What do all these examples tell us? Whether it is Darwin waiting 20 years, or the student staring at the rotting figs, or the manager hiding behind research, the pattern is the same. The mind creates a simulation of reality that is more terrifying and complex than reality itself. The people who succeed are not the ones who stop thinking. They are the ones who recognize when thinking has reached the point of diminishing returns. They understand that clarity does not come from thought. Clarity comes from action. Darwin found peace when he published. The pilot finds safety when they follow the checklist. The artist finds flow when they embrace the bad draft. You must look at these stories and see yourself in them. But you must also see the exit strategy. The exit strategy is never to think your way out of the problem. You cannot use the mind to fix the mind when the mind is the thing that is stuck. You must engage with the physical world. You must make the decision that allows the fig to be eaten, even if it is not the sweetest one on the tree. In the next chapter, we will take these lessons and project them forward. We have looked at the immediate struggle and the examples of others. Now we need to look at your long-term transformation. We need to discuss how you build a life where overthinking is not just managed, but utilized, where your analytical depth becomes your greatest asset rather than your heaviest burden. We are moving from the reactive state to the proactive state. We are going to discuss how to turn this mental energy into a sustainable engine for growth. The detox plan is coming, but first we must understand the destination. That is what we will cover in Chapter 9. Chapter 9, Long-Term Transformation. We have spent a considerable amount of time dissecting the anatomy of overthinking. We have looked at the biological triggers, the chemical cascades, and the habits that keep you trapped in a loop of mental hesitation. We have discussed the immediate tools you can use to sever those loops. But now we need to look at the horizon. We need to talk about what happens when you actually win this war. This is not just about getting more work done. That is a superficial metric. The true transformation goes much deeper into the core of your psychology. It reshapes your identity. When you successfully dismantle the mechanisms of overthinking, you are not just a more productive worker. You become a fundamentally different operator in your own life. Let us begin by addressing the concept of mental bandwidth. For years, your mind has been running a high-intensity background process. It is like a computer trying to render a complex 4K video while you're trying to write a simple email. The fans are spinning, the system is hot, and everything is lagging. That background process is the constant simulation of disaster, the replaying of past conversations, and the agonizing over future variables you cannot control. When you commit to the long-term work of stopping overthinking, that background process shuts down. The silence that follows is profound. This is the first stage of your transformation. You reclaim your cognitive load. Suddenly you have access to mental resources you forgot you owned. Problems that used to feel insurmountable now seem like simple puzzles. This is not because you became smarter overnight. It is because you are finally applying your full intelligence to the problem instead of applying half of it to your anxiety. In your career, this shift is nothing short of revolutionary. The professional who overthinks is always playing defense. They are trying not to make a mistake. They are trying not to look foolish. They are trying to cover every angle before they take a single step. This is a psychology of fear. The transformed professional plays offense. When you stop overthinking, you develop what psychologists call executive presence. This is rooted in the speed of your decision-making. You realize that most decisions are reversible. You understand that waiting for perfect information is a fool's errand because perfect information does not exist, so you act. You gather the available data, you trust your intuition, and you move. This shifts how others perceive you. In a team setting, the overthinker is a bottleneck. They are the person who needs one more meeting or one more review. They drain the energy of the group. But the person who has conquered overthinking becomes a catalyst. You become the person who unblocks the path. Your confidence suggests that you can handle the consequences of a wrong decision. That is a powerful signal to send to your peers and your superiors. You are saying that you trust your future self to handle whatever happens. This leads to a massive boost in creative output. Creativity is widely misunderstood. We often think of it as a lightning strike of inspiration. But psychologically speaking, creativity is simply the connection of disparate ideas. It is your brain playing with concepts. You cannot play when you are terrified. You cannot connect new ideas when you are obsessively policing your own thoughts. Overthinking stifles creativity because it applies a filter of judgment before the idea even has a chance to breathe. You kill the idea in the womb because you are afraid it might be bad. When you undergo this long-term transformation that filter lifts, you allow yourself to produce bad ideas so that you can eventually find the good ones. You stop seeing your work as a reflection of your worth as a human being. You start seeing it as an experiment. This detachment is healthy. It allows you to produce at a volume you never thought possible. You write the draft without editing every sentence. You launch the project without worrying if the logo is perfect. You speak up in the meeting without rehearsing the sentence 10 times in your head. You move from a state of hesitation to a state of flow. And flow is where high performance lives. Now let us look at the impact on your relationships. This is often the most surprising area of growth for recovering overthinkers. We tend to think of overthinking as a solitary struggle, but it destroys connection. When you are overthinking, you are not present. You are physically in the room, but your mind is 3 steps ahead or 5 steps back. You are analyzing the subtext of a comment or wondering if you offended someone yesterday. This creates a barrier. People can feel when you are not really there. They can sense the anxiety radiating off you. Furthermore, overthinking leads to projection. You invent narratives about what other people are thinking or feeling. You assume they are angry when they are just tired. You assume they are judging you when they are actually thinking about their own lunch. These fabricated narratives create conflict where none existed. The long-term transformation brings you back to reality. You stop mind reading. You start asking. If you are unsure about a dynamic, you simply ask for clarification instead of spiraling for 3 days. You become a safer person to be around. Your stability becomes contagious. Instead of needing constant reassurance from your partner or your friends, you become a source of reassurance for them. You are grounded. You are present. And that deepens every connection in your life. Let's discuss the internal emotional landscape. The chronic overthinker lives in a state of high cortisol. The body is constantly bracing for a threat that never arrives. Over time, this leads to burnout and fatigue. The transformation process involves resetting your nervous system. You move from a sympathetic state of fight or flight to a parasympathetic state of rest and digest. You will notice you have more physical energy. You sleep better. The constant tension in your shoulders releases. But the biggest emotional shift is the development of self-trust. Overthinking is fundamentally a lack of trust in yourself. It is the belief that if you do not hyper-analyze every detail, you will mess everything up. You believe that your anxiety is the only thing keeping the plane in the air. When you let go, you realize the plane flies just fine without your worry. You learn that you are capable of handling spontaneous challenges. You realize that your resilience is not built in the planning phase, it is built in the action phase. This creates a positive feedback loop. You act and you survive. You act again and you succeed. Your brain begins to rewire its understanding of risk. You start to view the unknown not as a threat but as a space of potential. This is the mindset of the high achiever. It is not that they lack fear. It is that they do not let fear mandate their cognitive processes. They feel the fear and then they focus on the task. This transformation also changes how you view failure. To the overthinker, failure is a confirmation of their inadequacy. It is the nightmare scenario they were trying to avoid. To the transformed mind, failure is just data. It is neutral feedback from reality. You tried approach A and it did not work. Therefore, you must try approach B. There is no emotional collapse. There is just calibration. This creates a level of persistence that is impossible when you are overthinking. If every setback triggers a week of rumination, you will never finish a long-term project. But if a setback is just a signal to adjust, you keep moving. This is how careers are built. This is how businesses are scaled. This is how mastery is attained. It is the result of thousands of small corrections, not one perfect plan. Consider the mental energy you are currently using to sustain your anxiety. It is a massive amount of energy. It takes effort to maintain a state of worry. It takes calories. It takes focus. Imagine if you took that exact same amount of energy and directed it toward learning a new skill. Imagine if you directed it toward understanding your industry deeply. Imagine if you directed it toward listening to your customers or your family. That is the alchemical shift we are aiming for. We are not trying to destroy your intense mind. Your intensity is a gift. The fact that you can think deeply is a superpower. We just want to change the direction of the beam. We want to turn that laser away from your own insecurities and point it at the world. When an overthinker finally learns to focus outward, they become unstoppable. They have the processing power to solve complex problems, but they no longer have the friction of self-doubt slowing them down. This long-term change requires maintenance. You do not fix this once and walk away forever. It is a lifestyle. It is a daily hygiene practice, much like brushing your teeth. You will have days where the old patterns try to return. You will face high-stress situations that trigger the old desire to ruminate. But the difference is that you will recognize it. You will see the trap before you step into it. You will catch yourself spiraling, and you will have the tools to say stop. You will know how to ground yourself. You will know how to separate a productive thought from a parasitic one. This meta-awareness is the ultimate shield. You become the watcher of your thoughts rather than the victim of them. As you solidify this transformation, you will notice your goals getting bigger. When you are trapped in overthinking, your goals are usually about safety. You want to keep your job. You want to avoid conflict. You want to get through the week. When you are free, your goals become about expansion. You start asking what you are actually capable of. You start looking for challenges rather than avoiding them because you know that challenges are the only way to test your new capacity. You might find yourself taking on leadership roles you previously avoided. You might find yourself starting that business you have been dreaming about for years. You might find yourself speaking publicly or publishing your work. These things require a thick skin and a quiet mind. They require you to value your output more than you value your comfort. The psychological toll of overthinking is that it keeps you small. It convinces you that the world is too dangerous and that you are too fragile. The truth of your transformation is realizing that you are anti-fragile. You get better with pressure as long as you do not internalize it as stress. You can handle the chaos of the real world much better than you can handle the chaos of your own mind. Think about the most impressive people you know. Do they seem frantic inside? Do they seem like they are second-guessing every word they say? Likely not. They have a stillness about them. That stillness is not emptiness. It is focus. It is the absence of mental noise. That is where you are heading. This journey transforms your timeline. Overthinkers often feel behind in life. They feel like they have wasted years spinning their wheels. The beauty of this shift is that once you start moving, the acceleration is rapid. You can cover more ground in 1 year of focused action than you did in 10 years of overthinking. You stop looking at the past with regret because you are too busy building the future. Or your identity shifts from being a person who thinks to a person who does. This is the ultimate cure for the imposter syndrome we discussed earlier. You cannot feel like a fraud when you have a stack of completed work to point to. The evidence of your competence is right there in front of you. It is tangible. It is real. So as we prepare to move into the final chapter and lay out your specific action plan, I want you to hold this vision in your mind. I want you to imagine a version of yourself that is light, a version of yourself that creates without apology, a version of yourself that trusts your own judgment. This is not a fantasy. This is a physiological and psychological possibility. It is simply a matter of retraining the neural pathways that have led you astray. You have spent enough time at war with your own mind. It is time to declare a truce. It is time to use that magnificent brain of yours for what it was designed to do. Solving problems, creating value, and connecting with others. The mental prison is unlocked. You just have to walk out the door. In the next and final segment, we are going to take everything we have discussed and condense it into a 30-day protocol. We are going to give you the daily habits, the morning routines, and the evening reflections that will cement this transformation. We are moving from theory to practice, from understanding to execution, because as we now know, thinking about the solution is not enough. You must act. Let us build your plan. Chapter 10: Your Overthinking Detox Plan. We have arrived at the final threshold. Over the course of this analysis, we have dissected the anatomy of overthinking. We have looked at the neurobiology that traps you in loops of hesitation. We have examined the emotional cost of living in a state of perpetual analysis. We have studied the habits of high performers and the tools that can grant you mental clarity. But all of that information remains abstract until you apply it. Insight without action is merely another form of overthinking. It is just another piece of data for your brain to chew on while you remain stationary. This creates a psychological trap known as the knowledge-action gap. You know exactly what is wrong. You know exactly what you should do, yet you do not do it. This gap is where self-trust goes to die. To bridge this gap, we need more than good intentions. We need a protocol. We need a structured system designed to override your brain's default setting of hesitation. This is your overthinking detox plan. It is a 30-day intervention designed to rewire your cognitive patterns. We are not just trying to change what you think about. We are changing how you think. We are moving your operating system from a state of passive prediction to a state of active engagement. The first phase of this detox spans the first 7 days. We call this the cognitive offloading phase. Your brain is currently overwhelmed because it is trying to hold too much data in working memory. When you try to remember tasks, ideas, worries, and potential outcomes all at once, your prefrontal cortex jams. It cannot process decisions because it is too busy maintaining the status quo. For the first week, your primary directive is aggressive externalization. You must stop treating your mind as a storage device. Every morning you will perform a brain dump. This is not a to-do list. It is a psychological purge. You will write down every single open loop in your life. This includes the project due next week, the text message you forgot to return, the strange noise your car is making, and the vague sense of dread you feel about the future. Psychologically, this serves a critical function. It tells your amygdala that the threat has been registered. When you keep a worry inside your head, your brain cycles through it repeatedly to ensure you do not forget it. By writing it down, you provide your brain with the permission to let it go. You are transferring the cognitive load from your neurons to the paper. During this first week, you must also introduce a technique called worry time. This sounds counterintuitive, but it is highly effective behavioral therapy. Assign a specific window of 20 minutes in the late afternoon for pure overthinking. During the rest of the day, when a worry arises, you acknowledge it and tell yourself that you will process it at 4 o'clock. When 4 o'clock arrives, you sit down and worry as hard as you can. You write down every catastrophe. You analyze every angle. But when the timer goes off, you stop. You get up and physically change your environment. This trains your brain that worry is a scheduled activity with a start and end point rather than a continuous background radiation. The second phase covers days 8 through 14. We call this the constraint phase. Overthinking feeds on unlimited options. When you have infinite time and infinite choices, your brain will naturally seek the perfect path. This search for perfection is actually a fear of making the wrong choice. To cure this, we must artificially restrict your environment. During this week, you will apply aggressive time boxing to every decision. If you need to write an email, you give yourself 5 minutes. If you need to choose a venue for a meeting, you give yourself 10 minutes. You are not allowed to research beyond that time limit. This will feel uncomfortable. Your brain will scream that you do not have enough information. It will tell you that you are being reckless. You must lean into this discomfort. You are engaged in exposure therapy. You are exposing yourself to the anxiety of imperfection and realizing that the world does not end. By forcing decisions within tight constraints, you teach your brain to value speed over certainty. You are strengthening your decision-making muscle by increasing the volume of choices you make, even if they are small. The third phase spans days 15 through 21. This is the action bias phase. By now you have cleared some mental space and practiced making faster decisions. Now we must tackle the fear of execution. Overthinking often masquerades as preparation. You read one more article. You check the data one more time. You convince yourself that you are working when you are actually stalling. For this week, your mantra is simple. Do it badly. Your goal is not to produce quality work. Your goal is to produce volume. If you are a writer, you write terrible drafts. If you are an entrepreneur, you launch broken prototypes. If you are a student, you submit rough outlines. We are attacking the psychological root of perfectionism. Perfectionism is a defense mechanism. It protects you from judgment. If you never finish the work, you can never be criticized. By intentionally doing things badly, you short-circuit this fear. You prove to yourself that a bad draft is infinitely more valuable than a perfect idea that never leaves your head. You will find that once you start moving, the friction disappears. Action clears the fog that analysis creates. The final phase covers days 22 through 30. This is the integration phase. You have disrupted your patterns. You have constrained your time. You have forced action. Now you must stabilize these behaviors into a new identity. During this period, you will focus on reflective competence. At the end of each day, you will not just list what you did. You will analyze how you felt. You will look at the moments where you slipped back into overthinking. What triggered it? Was it fatigue? Was it a specific person? Was it a vague fear of failure? You are becoming the observer of your own mind. This involves a technique called cognitive diffusion. You learn to see your thoughts as passing events rather than absolute truths. Just because your brain says you are not ready does not mean you are not ready. It just means your brain is generating a thought about readiness. During this final week, you solidify the habit of questioning your own hesitation when you feel the urge to pause and think you instinctively push forward instead. To support this 30-day protocol, you need a set of daily maintenance habits. These are the tools that keep the psychological machinery running smoothly. First, you must curate your inputs. Your brain is a processing engine. If you feed it garbage, it will produce anxiety. In the modern world, we are inundated with information that we cannot act upon. This creates a state of learned helplessness. You see tragedies and crises and opinions that you can do nothing about. Your brain churns on this data, looking for a solution, but there is none. This is fuel for overthinking. You must ruthlessly filter your digital environment. Unfollow accounts that make you feel inadequate. Turn off notifications that interrupt your focus. Every interruption forces your brain to reorient itself, which drains glucose and lowers your threshold for stress. When you are tired, you are more likely to overthink. Protecting your attention is not just about productivity. It is about sanity. Second, you must prioritize sleep and physical physiology. It is impossible to have a calm mind in an agitated body. When you are sleep deprived, your amygdala becomes hyperactive. You perceive threats where there are none. You interpret neutral facial expressions as hostile. You read rejection into silence. Physical movement is the fastest way to change your mental state. Overthinking is often just trapped energy. It is a fight or flight response with nowhere to go. When you exercise, you burn off the excess cortisol and adrenaline that fuels your anxiety. You do not need to become a marathon runner. You just need to move your body enough to signal to your nervous system that you are not under attack. Third, you must practice the art of the intentional review. Overthinkers often ruminate on the past. They replay conversations and analyze mistakes. This is a destructive loop. We want to replace rumination with review. Once a week, sit down and look at your progress objectively. Look at the data. What did you actually accomplish? What actually went wrong? Not what you felt went wrong, but what actually happened. Usually you will find that the reality is far less dramatic than your internal narrative. This objective review helps you calibrate your risk assessment. You start to see that the things you worried about rarely happen, and when they do happen, they are manageable. As you move through this detox, you will notice a shift in your internal dialogue. The voice of doubt will not disappear. That voice is part of your survival instinct. It is trying to keep you safe. But the volume will decrease. You will stop identifying with the voice. You will hear it suggesting that you should wait, that you should check again, that you are not ready. And you will be able to acknowledge that thought and act anyway. This is the ultimate goal of the detox. It is not to empty your mind of all thought. That is impossible. The goal is to detach your actions from your feelings. You can feel uncertain and still move. You can feel unprepared and still start. You can feel afraid and still lead. The paralysis you have felt for so years is not a permanent condition. It is a behavioral pattern reinforced by repetition. Every time you hesitated in the past, you rewarded your brain with a temporary sense of relief. You avoided the risk, so your brain said, "Good job, let us do that again next time." You have spent years building a highway of hesitation in your mind. Now you are building a new road, a road of action. At first it will be a dirt path. It will require effort to find it. You will have to hack through the weeds of your old habits. But every time you act without overthinking, you pack the dirt down a little firmer. Every time you catch yourself in a loop and step out of it, you widen the path. Eventually, this new road becomes the highway. Decisiveness becomes your default. You have the plan. You understand the science. You see the cost of staying the same. The only variable remaining is your choice. The detox starts the moment you decide that the pain of staying stuck is greater than the pain of change. Do not wait for the perfect time to start this plan. Do not tell yourself you will start on Monday. Do not think about whether you can finish it. That is the old you talking. That is the overthinker trying to sabotage the process before it begins. Start today. Start with the brain dump. Get the noise out of your head. Look at it on paper. Realize that these are just tasks and problems to be solved, not monsters to be feared. You are capable of focus. You are capable of clarity. You are capable of building a life where your mind is your greatest ally rather than your hidden enemy. The cage is open. You just have to walk out. The integrated self, from noise to signal. You have journeyed through the cognitive mechanics of your own mind. We dissected how the brain defaults to protective worry and how that mechanism hijacks your productivity. The transformation from a chronic overthinker to a focused achiever is not about silencing your thoughts completely. It is about cognitive integration. You must learn to distinguish the signal from the noise. The noise is the anxious chatter of the amygdala trying to predict every possible failure. The signal is your rational intent and your executive function choosing to act despite uncertainty. True psychological resilience is built when you stop identifying with every passing thought. You are not your anxiety. You are the observer who decides which thoughts warrant attention and which ones should be discarded. As you implement these tools and strategies, remember that clarity comes from movement, not stagnation. By trusting your ability to handle challenges as they arise, you free up the mental energy previously wasted on hypothetical disasters. This is the integrated self. You are no longer at the mercy of mental loops. You are in command of your attention and your time.